I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I don't just mean reading this script because I keep messing it up, but I'm no stranger to setting up an Android device. I picked up my first Anbernic Android last month and I was immediately confused. See, I'm used to Android devices that are completely blank slates. You install Obtainium, you download your emulators, set up a front end, and you're good to go. But Anbernic have done a good chunk of the work for you, installing some emulators and giving you the front end that they've created as well. And some of you may even have bought a games card filled with 27,000 games, which sounds impressive until you realise that 26,000 of them are regional variants of Tetris. Those preloaded cards are a bit like buying a complete DVD collection from a car boot sale. Half are scratched, a quarter are in Polish, and one is just 90 minutes of somebody's wedding. And the actual quality of these cards is atrocious anyway. I mean, the only thing they ever do reliably is fail. But unless you buy one of those cards, you don't get any instructions on how to set things up. The correct folder structure is apparently a state secret guarded more carefully than the nuclear codes. Most of the setup guides that I've seen just take you through the bog standard Android setup process. But that's duplicating a lot of work that's already been done for you. So I've put together this guide for a reliable setup, working with what Ambonic have given you already instead of tearing it all out and starting from scratch. Now, these aren't going to be the optimum settings for every single emulator. I just want to get you up and running so you can play some games as quickly as possible. It should make things much easier, much quicker, and you'll have a fully functioning device by the end of this video. What's more, I want to make this simple enough so that anybody can follow it, even if you think that exFAT is what happens when you have one of those new slimming injections. You'll need a couple of downloads for this, Rufus and a setup file that I've prepared to simplify things. Both are available in a free Patreon post, along with some advanced configuration options for later. There's a link in the description. If you want to download those now, then go for it. And whilst the rest of us wait, let's have an intro. Now, before we start, even though this isn't a review, for the purposes of completeness, I do need to say this particular unit has been sent over by Mech DIY, but no money has changed hands, and I retain complete editorial control over the content that I put out. I'll be doing a proper review of this at some point in the future, but before I can do that, of course, I've got to set it up. So let's get stuck in straight away. And the first thing that we're going to do before we even touch your device is set up your SD card. And first things first, we're going to format it. So open up Rufus and select your SD card from the device drop down at the top. Now make sure you're absolutely certain that you've selected the correct drive here, because everything on this is going to be erased. I've not found Rufus has enabled you to select your C drive or your D drive, so it shouldn't be a problem, but do check. Next, under boot selection, you want to make sure that it's set to non-bootable. You want to set the file system to exFAT. exFAT is the format of the card that you want. You're going to have files over 1 gigabyte potentially. So, you know, perhaps a heavy Switch game or a heavy Wii game, those are going to be things that you need exFAT for. You can leave the cluster size as default and then give it a volume label if you want. You also want to untick the checkbox that says Create Extended Label and Icon Files. And once you've done that, click Start, confirm you're happy to erase everything on the card, and Rufus will format it. And once it's finished, you've got a clean exFAT formatted card ready to go. Next, we're going to load your games onto the card, but that means you have to have the right folders on the card in the first place. And this is why I gave you that separate download zip file. Inside that zip file, what I've done is create all of the folders that the Ambonic Launcher can use. So instead of creating them manually, all you've got to do is unzip these folders to the root of your SD card. And that's as simple as double-clicking on the zip file to open it in a new window. And you should see all of the folders listed underneath. Then open a second window and navigate to your SD card, and then just drag the folders from the zip file onto your SD card. Now, if you've used Android handhelds before, you'll know that you usually put your ROMs into a ROMs folder, but the RG launcher doesn't work like that. So to make this as easy as possible, this is where your folders need to be, right in the root of that card. And once you've done that, copy any ROMs that you want onto the SD card. Now, I would suggest trying to find at least one ROM for every system so that when we go through the setup process, you can make sure that everything's working. You'll definitely want to have ROMs for the NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, PC Engine or TurboGrafx-16, PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64, Nintendo DS, Dreamcast, GameCube, PSP, PS2, Sega Saturn, 3DS, and Wii. That's assuming that your device can handle those systems, because not all of them can. It should be noted that there is no Switch on this list, and you can download the Eden emulator if you want, but that's a slightly different video. Here, I just want to get you set up with the bog standard stuff that Anbernic have already provided. Once all of those are copied across, take that card out of your computer and plug it back into your device. Now you can turn it on, and the first time that you turn it on, you're going to have to go through the initial setup process. It doesn't take too long, maybe about, 5 to 6 minutes. And the first thing that you do is you choose your language. And obviously I'm choosing English here, and I always like to do this even if I think it's set properly, because I don't want to get past this step and then realize I've set it wrong. After that, you'll go into your Wi-Fi settings, tap on the little button to turn on Wi-Fi and add your network. This is a pretty standard thing to do on Android. When you're connected, hit the back icon to take you back to the Wi-Fi settings screen and then tap on Next. Then you have the date settings, and I always tap on this, and it's always already set to set time automatically. If it isn't, just turn that on, tap back, and then tap on Next. And then the system is going to load its configuration files. Now, it can take a little while to do this, so go away, make yourself a cup of tea. It only takes a couple of minutes, but you don't have to sit there watching it. When it's done, you'll get a message that says, "Finish! Go in system!" Yeah, I know, so tap that to finish and go in system. On the home screen, you're going to be able to scroll left and right through various different pages, and you'll see all the apps that are in there. And what you'll notice out of the box is that you've got loads of different emulators already installed and largely set up. But we'll get into emulators in a bit. Now, some consoles come with Google Play services included, and if you've got the Play Store there, then I would advise setting that up first. Just tap on the Play Store, sign in with your Google account, and you are good to go. And really that just means that if there's anything that you usually get from the Play Store, anything you've already got access to, something like the Beacon launcher, for example, if you wanted to add that later, you can go straight to the Play Store. You don't have to mess around with all of that horrid side-loading stuff. So we're finally ready to start setting our games up. And by default, Anbernic uses their own launcher. And to get to that, you press and hold the Anbernic button. Now, the first time you do this, not only will the launcher load, but it's going to scan your card to find all of those games that we've already set up. And at this point, it's going to tell you the configuration needs to be completed. So you press confirm on that, and then you're going to get another program open automatically, and that is RetroArch. And you need to say OK to allow it to read external storage. And then RetroArch's going to download a couple of things. And before we get into the bones of this proper, we're just going to do a few updates. So on that page where you left off, you want to find the online updater. It'll be about 4 icons down from the top. Tap on that, and the first thing we're going to do is update installed cores. Now, Anbernic will have already loaded this with some cores that you need to get started, so that saves a bit of time. But it's always worth checking that these things are up to date. When that's done, scroll down to the very bottom of that same page and you'll see a list of different updates that you can do. It starts with update core info files and ends with update GLSL shaders. So I go from the bottom up here and you tap on each one and let that update. And I go from the bottom up because otherwise it will put some signs across it as it's loading stuff. Now you don't have to wait when you've tapped on each one. You can just tap on each one and it's going to start the process. And all you have to do is wait for it to finish. The last one that takes a little while is the cheats one. Don't worry about it. Just let it do its job. Okay, RetroArch is the engine that you're going to use to play a lot of the classic games, so it's worth setting a few things up here before we do anything else. On the right-hand side of the screen, you've got 4 different icons. The very top one is a little home icon, and then you've got a burger menu underneath that, which is your playlists, and then you've got a cog underneath that, and that's your settings. So we're going to want to tap on that cog because that's what we need to do, change the settings. From there, we want to go into video and scaling, and we just want to make sure that integer scale is turned off. It should be by default. And the aspect ratio here needs to be set to core provided. Scrolling down on that page, you'll also want to make sure that bilinear filtering is set to off as well. I think it is by default. And crop overscan is set to on, and again, I think that is by default too. This is just giving us a good base for all of the games that we want to load. And sometimes you'll want to turn some of these features on, but by and large, these are going to be the settings that we're using for most things. Now, it should be noted that I said to make sure that integer scaling is turned off, and a lot of guides out there will tell you to turn integer scaling on. But integer scaling isn't perfect for every system, and my preference is always to keep it off until you find a system where you know you can turn it on and it's going to fill the full screen. Now, you might be different. You might not mind if it fills the full screen or not. Then there's black borders around it. If not, if you don't mind that, then that is up to you. Go ahead, turn it on for now. Just be aware that you are going to get those borders around your picture on many systems. Okay, next we're going to back out onto the main menu settings again. Now, a quick tip here. If you want to get back to a top level menu, so that's the main menu or the settings menu, which are the two we're going to be using the most, you just tap on the icon on the right hand side of the screen and it's going to take you straight there rather than having to back out through all of the other pages you've already opened. So once we're on that main menu again, go down to latency and we're going to set run ahead to second instance mode, and the number of frames we want to set is 1. And very basically, run ahead turns your emulation device into a little bit of a psychic. It gets to look ahead of what's being displayed, and then it rewinds to apply your actual input. This does take a little bit of power to use, so if things are going wrong for your emulation, this is probably the first thing that you should look at turning off, that and any shaders that you set up. So set this to second instance mode. We also need to tell it how many frames it gets, and we set that to 1. Now, some cores don't let you use save states at the same time, and you'll get a warning if that's the case. So for those, you have to make a decision on whether you want to be able to use save states or this latency hack. And personally, I think it's better to have the save states. It's one of the major features of emulation. But you don't have to do that now. Our default is going to be that we will turn run ahead on. And then if you come across a system which is telling you later on that it can't use save states, then you can turn it off for that individual system. Dreamcast is one of those, although it handles turning that off automatically. Okay, back out to the settings menu again, and you can do that by tapping the cog, and then go to user interface, on-screen overlay, and we're just going to turn off display overlay for the moment. And you'll see what that does in a bit. Back out to your settings again, and go to the input menu, and then hotkeys. And hotkeys allows you to use a key combination in order to do various different things that aren't game related, but they are emulator related. There's a few of these that I like to set up. The menu toggle on this is already done. So the first hotkey that we want to set up is the actual hotkey enable, and we're going to use the select button for that. Now, don't tap on the screen here because it does seem to mess things up on these devices. What you've got to do instead is hover over the thing you want to change using the D-pad and then press the B button. And then you press the button that you want to assign. So we'll assign select as your hotkey enable by pressing select. And next we go down to the setting that says quit, not the one that says quit controller combo, just the one that says quit. Move down with the D-pad to get to that, press B again, and then press start. These are just my preferred options. You might choose something else. If you wanted to choose something different, then that's up to you. But then we're going to move on to fast forward using the D-pad again, and we're going to set that up to R2. And now you can either use that for fast forward as a toggle or fast forward by holding it down. Personally, I like the idea of using it as a toggle, but again, that's up to you. So press B again and then R2. Then find rewind, press B again and then L2. So the opposite of what we've just done. And then scroll down to load state, where we're going to press B and L1, and save state, B and R1. So your shoulder buttons save and load states, and your trigger buttons fast forward and rewind. One final thing I like to do, which is a bit handy when you're debugging, is to find the option that says show FPS and set this to the Y key. Let's go back to the input menu by pressing that triangle button at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, and then you find the option to confirm quit, and we're going to turn that off. And all that means is that when you press start and select, you're going to quit out of the game straight away. And if you didn't have this turned on, you'd have to press that combination twice before you quit the game. I find that particularly annoying, so I like to turn that off. Now, there's a few options here that some people like and some people don't, so you have to let your preferences guide whether or not you want to do this. First of all, under settings and saving, you can turn on auto save states and auto load states. Now, personally, I like to manage my save states manually, but this does mean that every time you exit a game, it will automatically save where you are, and then when you load the game back in, it will automatically pick up from where you left off. You also have the option to turn on save state thumbnails, which actually I quite like. And then you can turn on increment save states automatically if you want. It's not a necessity, but without this on, every time you save something, it overwrites the state that you had before. With this on, you get a brand new save state, so you can go backwards and forwards between states. It's not something that I like to do. I prefer to manage these things manually, but some people love this thing, so there we go. Now, if you're into RetroAchievements, you can set that up here as well. Tap on the little cog icon, tap on the achievements option, then toggle the turn on achievements option to turn it on, and you're going to see some other options appear. The first thing I do here is to turn off hardcore mode, because hardcore mode stops you from being able to load and save states. And then when you're done with that, you'll have settings for username and password. Just tap on each one and set your username and password for the RetroAchievements website. Now we've made all of these changes, we don't want to undo them by closing down RetroArch. So the first thing that we'll do here is tap on the icon, the home icon, and then scroll down until you see the option that says configuration file. Tap on that, we're going to tap on the save current configuration, and that's going to save all of the settings that we've just changed. Tap on home again, scroll right to the bottom, and then tap on the quit menu, and we'll end up back at the Ambonic Launcher. Unfortunately, we're not quite done yet because Ambonic override a lot of the RetroArch settings when you load games from their launcher. My personal feeling is that what they've done is taken a configuration file that works well for 16:9 screens, and they've put it in a 4:3 console. So if you're on a 16:9 screen, you might actually look at this and be going, well, it looks perfectly fine to me. But here, on this 477M, things aren't quite right. If we load up Kirby's Adventure, you'll see that whilst the image is filling the screen top to bottom, it's not filling it side to side. And yet this game should be the same size as the screen. So for this game at least, the aspect ratio is wrong, and that's directly down to the Anbernic settings. So we're going to need to unset them. I'm afraid this is the most boring and frustrating part of the whole process. And I do apologize for that in advance. What I'll do is I'll show you how to do this for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and then you'll just have to follow the same process for every other system on the launch. It's about 29 systems, I think. It's exactly the same process. I know it's an absolute pain to do, but it is also the right thing to do here, I promise you. So firstly, navigate to the system that you want to change. We're on the NES here, and then press the select button. This is going to bring up your emulator settings. On the load configuration method, just tap on default RA configuration, then tap to save, and when it comes back with save success, you press the B button. And now you can press the R1 button, move on to the next system, and you just do that whole process over and over and over again and go through all of the different emulators. It actually doesn't take too long to do. It's just a little bit annoying, and I keep forgetting the sequence, so I keep slowing down every time I've got to remember, do I press the select button or the B button at this point? But once you're done, you will have a better configuration for your games. Now if we go back into Kirby, you'll see that it draws the circle properly. It's still not perfect yet, but it soon will be. The next thing we're going to do is deal with shaders. Now, some people love shaders, some people hate them. What I've got here is a very basic setup that will work across the board for everything in RetroArch. And if you're not interested in adding shaders at the moment, then you can just skip this section completely. Maybe come back to it later if you decide that you'd like to give it a try. So the first thing we're going to do is set up a global shader preset. And we'll do that by opening any game that runs in RetroArch. I'm going to be using Adventure Island here. Press the back button. It's going to get us into the RetroArch menu. And now you'll see we're in game settings at the moment. Press the little triangle at the bottom right-hand side of the screen and then tap on Quick Menu. Scroll to where it says Shaders and then tap on that. Then tap to turn on Video Shaders. We're going to load a particular preset here, and it's the preset that I like to use wherever I can. So go to where it says Load Preset and tap on that. Then Shaders, GLSL. Then we find CRT and scroll until you find CRT-Geom and just tap on that. Now, if I show you what's happened here, we'll get quite a nice effect, I think, but we also get this TV look as well, where the corners have been rounded and there's a little bit of a bend on the screen. Now, whether you like that or not is obviously going to be personal preference, but if you don't like it quite looking like this, and you'd like it just to be a square on the edges as much as possible, then this is how you turn it off. Still in that shaders menu, you're going to scroll to where it says shader parameters. You're going to find the curvature toggle and set that to 0. And you're going to find the corner size toggle and set that to 0.01. And if we have a look at what you get now, you see there's a slight rounded edge to the picture, but the shaders themselves are actually straight. And that's the way that I prefer to play games. You've got quite a nice, soft, subtle scanline effect on this, and I quite like this shader. It's one of my favorites, actually. So when you've done that, we need to make sure that we have saved everything, and we do that in that same shaders menu. We're going to tap on Save Preset and then Save Global Preset, and that's going to set this shader for every game and every system that you're using in RetroArch at the moment. And that's quite a nice way of having a single, quick setting for the bulk of the systems that RetroArch covers. But it's not really good enough for some handheld systems, which really need that LCD grid. So we'll quit out of this game now, which we can do by pressing Home and tapping Quit at the bottom of that menu. And then we'll back out and find a Game Boy game. Just going to open any Game Boy game, and you'll notice how the same shader that we've just set up exists on this console as well. And that's not quite right, because Game Boy, what you really want on a Game Boy is an LCD grid effect. So we're going to open our RetroArch menu again by pressing the back button. Go back to the quick menu like we did before, find shaders, tap load preset, go to the shaders GLSL folder and find the folder that says handheld, and then scroll down until you see LCD 3X GLSLP. Tap on that, save preset, save core preset this time, not global. And that means anytime you open a Game Boy game, you're going to get this nice LCD grid effect instead of the horizontal scan lines that we had before. And you'll need to do this with all of the handheld systems. So that's Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Gear, Neo Geo Pocket, Neo Geo Color, Wonder Swan, and Wonder Swan Color. Now, you don't have to worry about Game Boy Color because that's using the same core as the Game Boy one we've just set up. And I've got a feeling some of the systems that I've mentioned aren't actually available in the RG launcher. Now I come to think about it. So set up the ones that you can. And with that, our initial setup is done. But just to make sure this is as good as it can be, whilst not taking too long to set up, we're going to make a few changes to a couple of different systems. First is the Nintendo Entertainment System and the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16. Now, both of these consoles have an 8:7 aspect ratio, but because they knew those pictures would be stretched onto 4:3 televisions, they've created the art so that it would work on a ratio of 4:3. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to show you the settings and how to do this on the NES. You just follow exactly the same process for the PC Engine. So open up a game from that system, press the back button to get into the RetroArch menu, and then tap on the cog icon for settings and go down to video. Open up scaling again, you remember we did that before, and we want to change our aspect ratio from core provided to 4:3. Once you've done that, tap on the home menu, then the quick menu, scroll down until you get into overrides, and then choose Save Core Overrides. And that means every time that you open a NES game, it's going to use these settings. The core is another word for emulator here. So we've basically told it to save these settings for this emulator. When you've done this with a NES game and a PC Engine game, we're going to move on to the Game Boy. Okay, so the same process is roughly the same to start off. We find a Game Boy game that you want, you open it up, and we're setting this up for the entire core, and in this instance, for the Game Boy Color as well. So open that up, and once again, hit the back button to get into RetroArch, and this time, you want to make sure you're in the quick menu, and the quickest way I've found to do that is to tap the home icon and then select quick menu. And now we can change the specific emulator options, and we do that in core options. So go down and tap on that, and then we tap GB colorization and change that to internal. And this sets your emulator to use the internal presets that mimic the original Game Boy. But the original Game Boy had a specific look and feel as well, and we change that in the internal palettes menu. So tap on internal palettes, and now you can leave this as DMG and you'll get the sort of classic green Game Boy screen of the original Nintendo Game Boy. My personal preference here is to turn this into what the Game Boy Pocket looked like, so I set the Pocket setting inside the internal palette. The final thing that we're going to do here simulates the sort of ghosting effect that you got on those old LCD screens. It makes it look an awful lot more like a Game Boy. So scroll down to interframe blending and turn that on. And once you've done that, scroll to the top where it says Manage Core Options. Then you want to tap on that, save the content directory options, and then back out into the game itself, and you've got a more accurate Game Boy look. And once you've done that, we're going to move on to Dreamcast. Now, usually on Dreamcast, I like to use Flycast as a standalone app. But in this instance, because we want to be set up as quickly and efficiently as possible, we're going to be using the RetroArch core. It actually works very well for a lot of games, but since Flycast isn't installed by default on the Ambonic system, we're going to use this instead. So the first thing we'll do is open up a game, and then we're going to hit the back button to get into the RetroArch settings. And what we're going to need to do on Dreamcast, because the shader that we've chosen is a little bit too much for this particular system, first thing that we're going to do is go to the quick menu, and then go to Shader, and then load preset, shaders, GLSL, CRT, and then find the one that says ZFast-CRT. And I really like this shader. It's a very light one. You can use it on pretty much any system. But it's going to give you the performance that you need, but it's going to give you a little bit of that shader look as well. I should say, though, if you have performance issues either on Dreamcast or with any of the other systems, then it's always a good idea to just turn the shaders off altogether. Especially if you've got one of the T6118 chips. It's not always powerful enough to handle all of this stuff. So turn those off. It's a really good performance boosting mode. Anyway, still in that shaders menu, head to Save Preset and then Save Core Preset. Okay, we need to make one more setting change, but we're going to save this differently. So tap on the cog icon and then tap on the audio option. Then we want to tap onto audio output, and where it says output rate, change that from 48,000 to 44,100. If you just ran a Dreamcast game as is, you'd notice that there is audio stuttering, and that's because it's using the wrong sample rate. And what we've just done here is to change it to the right sample rate. Now at this point, you can go back into the quick menu again by pressing the home icon and then quick menu. Scroll down until you see overrides and then save core overrides. Now on to PlayStation 1, and there's one setting that I like to use for all of my games, and that's to turn on the DualShock controller. This is especially important if you're using a game like Ape Escape, and I actually really enjoy Ape Escape, so it's one of those games that I use for testing, and I always have to set this up on every single system, because that relies on the DualShock controller. So open up that game, tap on the back button after you've loaded the game, and we're going to go home and quick menu, and then we're going to go to controls and port 1 controls. Change your device type from standard to DualShock, back out to the controls menu, tap on manage remap files, and then save core remap files, and then we're done. So those are all the changes that we need to make in RetroArch. It's a massive job, but we're covering multiple emulators here. We've got 4 systems left that we need to make some changes to, and then 2 systems that we need to handle completely differently. Now we're going to start with Drastic. Drastic is for the Nintendo DS. A lot of people like Melon DS, but again, the ethos of this video is to get you up and running as quickly as possible with the stuff that's already provided. So hold down your Ambonic button to quit out of the launcher, and we want to find the Drastic icon on your Android screen, and then tap on that. It's going to say, ask if it can send you notifications, allow that or disallow it, whatever you want, that's up to you. Now, a lot of this works out of the box, and that's not necessarily with the most optimal settings, I've got to say, but again, we're getting you up and running as quickly as possible. So we're going to go into changing the options here, and then we're going to tap External Controller, and then we want to set up some hotkeys to make things a bit easier for you. So tap on Map Special, and for the screen swap, we want to press the R2 button, so that's your trigger key. For the fast forward, we're going to press R3, which is your stick. We're going to skip over Quick Save and Quick Load. To open the menu, we want to press the back button key. Then we're going to skip over left, up, right, down, all of those. And then for the screen swap, we want to press the L2 button. The microphone noise we're going to skip, as well as toggle auto fire and pointed down, skip all of those. And then back out onto the main change option menu and tap on the virtual gamepad. At the top, it says always show start and select buttons. Turn that off and then back out again. Now, this is one of those personal preference things again. On a device like this with a 4x3 screen, I don't like having stacked screens. Many of the DS and in fact 3DS games have bottom screens that aren't always that useful. In Mario Kart, for example, you get a track and you can see roughly where people are, but you don't need it to play the game. So my preference is to set all of those games to full landscape mode, so you only see one or other screen, and then you can switch those screens using the R2 button that we've just set up. So in order to do this, you need to go into General Settings, scroll to the bottom, and it says Default Layout. Set that to Landscape Full, and then back out. You can open up the Ambonic Launcher at this point, choose a game, load it up, and you should see that the game fills the screen. Pressing the R2 button will switch between screens. Pressing L2 will switch you to a layout where you do have one screen on top of the other if you want. And if you press the menu button, you're going to get a menu which gives us a little circle menu, which gives you things like save states and load states and other settings, etc. Okay, next we're going to sort out Sega Saturn. And there's not a lot to do here in order to get yourself going. So in the main Android desktop window, making sure you've closed everything else down, of course, open up Yaba Sanshiro and then click on the burger menu at the top left-hand side of the screen. Go to Settings, scroll down until you find Aspect Ratio and set that to 4:3. And the reason that you do this is that some games don't seem to work properly if you set it to original. Sega Saturn games were always 4:3, so regardless of what screen size you've got, you want to play it with the right aspect ratio, then this is how you do it. Use your back button to get out of the settings, and then you can just close down this system again. Now, going back to your launcher, if you find a Sega Saturn game and load it up again, it should fit the aspect ratio perfectly. Next, we're going to go into PS2, and there's only one thing that we really need to change here. Again, on your main Android desktop, open up Aether SX2, tap on the burger menu, go down to Controller Settings, Touchscreen Controller, View, and then tap None. That's all you've got to do. You can then back out onto your main menu and close that down. Okay, 3DS is going to take a little bit more of the setup just to get everything working properly. So the first thing that you do in your Android desktop is tap on Citra, and in the top right-hand side, click on the cog. The screen layout, we're going to tap on that and set that to single screen, and that's going to act the same way as it does on the DS, the one that we did earlier. Internal resolution, we can set that to at least 2x. If you have a problem, set it to 1x, but for most of the devices, 2x should be right. Or if you've got a more powerful device, you can actually set it to 3x. Scroll down to where it says New 3DS Mode and make sure that's checked. Scroll to where it says Theme and change that to Default. Scroll to Microphone Type and change that to Real Device. And a pop-up's going to come up at that point asking you whether you want to use that, and say yes while using the app. And that's all we're going to do there. So press B to go back and then close down Citra. Open up your Ambonic Launcher again and find a 3DS game. Open it up, and we're going to need to change some in-game settings here as well. So press the back button to open the main menu. Tap Settings, and we want to make sure that Custom Layout is unchecked. And we want to make sure that Asynchronous Shader Compilation is checked. And once you've done that, press B to back out of the game. And in 3DS games, you press down on the right analog stick, that's R3, in order to swap screens. Finally, we need to take a look at GameCube and Wii. And so close down all the 3DS stuff. This is actually a little bit awkward because the best file type for GameCube and Wii files are .rvz files, but the Ambonic Launcher doesn't recognize those files at all, so those won't show up under the launcher. Now, I think the best thing to do is to still have your games as RVZ files, but if you want to launch a GameCube or Wii game, you're going to need to use the Dolphin emulator. Now, you've got two versions of Dolphin that you can use. We're going to be setting up the Dolphin MMJR1, which is the one with the black icon and the purple logo. So tap on that, and then you're presented with what's essentially a white screen across the top. You've got three different options. You've got GameCube, Wii, and WiiWare. We're going to make sure we're on the GameCube option. Then on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, choose a directory to click on that little plus icon. Navigate to where your games are on the card, so you can do that by opening this burger menu, choosing your SD card, and then finding the GC folder is what we've set up here. And then just let Dolphin load those games in. We're now going to do the same thing if you have any Wii games as well. So tap on the second tab across the top, press the plus icon again, and now you find your Wii folder. And that'll load all of your Wii games in. Now, that's pretty much all we have to do. The GameCube and Wii games often work better when they're using the Vulkan backend. Unfortunately, some of those games can't use the Vulkan backend. So what we're going to do is set the main graphical renderer to Vulkan, and then I'm going to show you how to do an in-game setting. So first of all, to do that, we're going to tap on the cog icon, tap on graphics, and then under video backend, select Vulkan. That's what we're going to use for the bulk of our games. Then we're going to go back, and we're going to go to our main menu again. Now, if I open up something like Mario Kart Double Dash and I start the game, you'll see there's a graphical problem with this. The interface looks perfectly fine, but the actual screen looks really dark, as if somebody's got some sort of nighttime filter over the top of it. Tap on the back button and then exit emulation. And we're going to solve that problem right now. And what we do is long press on Mario Kart Double Dash, and we're going to choose Custom Game Settings. Then under Graphics again, change that video backend back to OpenGL. Back out of that, tap anywhere on the screen outside of the little box to get rid of that last menu. Then tap on Mario Kart Double Dash again, and when you start the game, you'll notice that now everything looks fine. Now, this won't run quite as well as using Vulkan, but I have found, at least on the handhelds that I've been using, I'm getting a fairly solid 60 frames a second. And I'm not glitching much either. I'm not getting a lot of slowdown and things like that. And that's it. All you've got to do to get your basic setup working with the Ambonic RG launcher. Now, obviously, there's other systems that this can play, and the RG launcher just doesn't cover some things like Atari or Amiga games. So if you wanted to play those on this system, it is possible, but I'm going to go into that in a different video, I think. But for now, what I've got for you is a Patreon post, and this post contains not only the file links that we talked about at the beginning of the video, but there are also other settings that you can try for the various different emulators that might give you either better performance or maybe a better graphical look, depending on which settings they are. Some people might want to change this, some people might just be happy how they are. That's entirely up to you. Now, it's very difficult to keep those comprehensive because, of course, I'm trying to do this for as many different devices as possible. Some of them just aren't powerful enough to run, say, PS2 or GameCube, and some of them are actually so powerful enough they can run Switch games, for example. This 477M will actually handle some Switch games, although it is a bit of a compromised experience. But do check that out to see if there's any tweaks that you can make on your games so that they look and feel and play better, or play the way that you want them to. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've found it useful, and I hope that you'll be able to get your console at least up and running to the point where you can actually play games as quickly as possible by using these steps. And I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. Is there anything that you're still struggling with, something that might be useful for other people as well? Is there a setting that you find particularly good on one console, something that isn't working for you that I might be able to help? Let me know. If I can do something about that, if I can do something about getting the information out to other people as well, I will. But that's it for this video. Thank you ever so much for watching, and until next time, happy gaming.